Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So good to be back in Finland. I haven't been here since 2019, so great to see some familiar faces live for once. Sorry, those of you who are watching online. But anyways, I got a beef to pick with you Finns, because I've been here so many times right now. And talking about courage pills, right? There's this thing about you Finns that you say, oh, we don't like to engage, we're shy, we're not asking questions. True, right? Yeah. So I think today it's about kind of standing up to that courage, because not just tomorrow, but this year is going to demand a lot of confidence, a lot of bravery. So I think just to kick this session off, I actually want to give yourself a big round of applause for hopefully embracing courage. So big round of applause to you. Come on. Great, so I'm here to talk about growth. Chasing growth is a little bit like eating when you're not hungry. Your brands are not failing because they don't grow. I will claim that for the most part, your brands are failing because you're not playing a meaningful role in people's lives. I think it's tough, and it's so interesting for me to hear a lot of your remarks on what this takes. I mean, I feel for the CMOs today, because there's going to be people standing and breathing down your neck and say, growth, growth, growth. And in that exercise, you're probably only going to focus on the 1P in the marketing mix, promotion, 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 and you're going to take the short-term road rather than focusing on your brands. For the CEOs in this room, it's probably a little bit even harder, because this system is just made to screw up, to be honest. Because every quarter you have to report and say, we're growing, this is going well. So this is not an easy exercise. So I almost feel like this could possibly be the worst time in the world to talk about purpose. Or maybe the best time in the world to talk about purpose. Because I think a lot of people think about purpose as sort of being the lifeboy towards growth. I'll actually tell you it's not. And most of the time it's not, because it's not done right. Because quite often I say purpose is a little bit like Pokemon. Everybody is searching for it, but nobody knows why. So let's try and figure out why. And the question is really this idea about growth, 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 and what is meaningful growth, in fact? What is meaningful growth? My own journey started about 15 years ago. And I come from the creative side of the business, the agency side of the business. So any agencies in the room, hands up. Yeah, there's quite a few agencies. Good. So I started out as a copywriter. And the thing that provoked me to create change and to think differently about how to build brands was a very specific event that happened in Copenhagen. COP15, the climate summit. And obviously I had extremely high expectations towards our elected government leaders to do something about this crisis. And as we all know, not a lot really happened. So obviously that's when I asked myself, what can I in fact do as a marketeer? How can I use my skill set for something different? And remember, this is years ago. So I wrote my first book. I was young, and talking about age and all that stuff, Richard. This is a much younger Thomas, less gray hairs. But I wrote a book called Goodvertising, and back then, it seemed like a novelty. I promise you, when the book came out and talking about brands as a force for good, nobody in this community would have cared. Honestly, it took years and years before I was invited to a stage at Cannes Lions. This was the beginning of Unilever's sustainable living plan. This was the times of Patagonia, Dove, Ben & Jerry's, Chipotle, all of these household names that we today are so familiar with. And we've been touted our ears full of Keith Weed back when he was a global CMO of Unilever saying, oh, our sustainable brands grow twice as fast as any other brand. So the thing was, obviously today, I'm super happy that all of you, more or less, hopefully, are beginning to embrace purpose. But I think we're doing it the wrong way. Because if you think about it, this idea that for so long time you have told all of us that you're doing the greatest product in the world. Right now what you're telling me is you are the greatest for the world. And that doesn't really look that good. It's like, hey, look at us. Look at what we're doing for ocean plastics. Look at us, what we're doing for climate change. We're going to fix all of this. It's kind of like going into a bar. You're kicking open the door to the bar and you're saying, I'm the world's best lover. At some point, somebody's going to figure out you're not. Sorry. So there's something about that mentality. Saying, oh, we're the most diverse company, or we're the most sustainable company, or we're aspiring to this and that. I mean, the whole jargon in this space is crazy. Have we forgotten this sort of human connection, what it is to be human? Let me give you one good example. So I'm sure quite a few of you, hopefully all of you, have these pledges, right? 2030, 2040, 2050, you want to do something about the climate, etc., right? Yeah? This is the time you have to say yes, because else you're screwed. Yes, you have those pledges. Good. So think about that. And this is just a little analogy to get things kicked off. So let's say I come home for this beautiful event here, thanks to Sanoma from Finland, and unfortunately I take my girlfriend being unfaithful towards me. Bad situation. Obviously I get extremely upset and angry at her. So she says, you know what, Thomas? I'm sorry. I screwed up, but I promise you, towards 2030, I'm going to be a little bit less unfaithful each year until we're fully back together. Would you take that? Of course you wouldn't. So think about it. Sometimes it's almost like we think people don't have a choice. I have a daily choice every day. And my beef right now is, and sorry, Richard, to talk about young people, but especially young people today. I have two nieces, one is 13, one is 18. I'm still competing for the title of favorite uncle, but I still think I sort of have it. It's so interesting to talk to them. And I'm sure for those of you who have children that age as well, you recognize this. The thing is, in their lifetime, the only thing they've seen from all of you in this room is to blame you for environmental degradation and social injustice. Sorry. But the only thing they heard from you in the same time is, we're going to save the world. It's quite a paradox, right? So I started out and have been in the eye of the sort of purpose hurricane for years. And my first book was called Good Advertising. My second book is called The Hero Trap, because I think what we're doing right now is a hero trap. And I'm going to give you an example. If we take Patagonia, yes, I know we got to have Patagonia in there, but I'm going to take it as a bad example. Because if you listen to what Patagonia is saying, we're in the business to save our home planet. That's a pretty bold statement for a company that does T-shirts, right? Pretty bold statement. Patagonia can get away with it, and I think what they did the other day by giving away their company and the profits to environmental organizations is bravery. But probably 99.9% of you won't be doing that right away. I'll see the CEO who will go to that board and say, we're going to do the Patagonia model. I'm not sure that you're going to get a sign-off just today. So what's curious is, this is what most brands are saying, using this sort of language. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing and witnessing with all of these brands that are now talking about doing good, it's almost like you're going into the supermarket and everybody is sort of saying, oh, we're like the Mandela, we're Mother Teresa. It's too good to be true. And unfortunately, the more all of you talk about it, the more skeptical people are becoming. That's extremely sad, because we are about not only to save your brands and create meaningful brands, but we're also on a bigger mission, an urgent mission to stand up to climate change. And talking about sort of the business case, these are some numbers from an organization called Sustainable Brands. It says 65% of people, and I'm sure it's more or less the same in Finland, maybe it's a little bit higher, say they want to buy from purposeful brands. That's great news. Only about 26% follow through. So there's a gap of 39%. Can we figure that out in this moment of time? That could be really interesting. So let's talk about those 39%. But maybe it's not so strange that there is this gap between what we say and what we do. I think we can all sort of recognize that with the New Year's resolutions, right? Most of you do New Year's resolutions, right? Yeah? Some of you? Okay. But for me at least, it often ends up being a new beginning to really bad old habits. I mean, you're in January, and I mean, Denmark is pretty bad, Finland even worse. January, you promised yourself to go on that run. You look out the window and you're like, damn not. I'm not going out there. So it's difficult. It's difficult to create change. But again, can we figure that out? Richard talked about this empowerment thing, all these things that we want to achieve. So I'm going to share my New Year's resolution, but it's going to demand that you're going to share yours as well, okay? So this is going to be the honesty conversation we're going to have here today. It's not going to leave the room besides the many thousand people watching on the live stream. So what I want you to do is I want you to shout out loud your New Year's resolution. It's a good little prep thing because, 2023 is coming just around the corner. So I'm going to count down and then you're going to shout it out loud. 3, 2, 1. You're disappointing me because of 2 reasons. Because we started with the rallying cry in the beginning, where you said you'd prove yourself wrong. Secondly, I know your Finns are perfect, but there's got to be a little bit you want to change, okay? So let's just give you a second chance, okay? 3, 2, 1. Perfect. For those of you watching online, I mean, your cat, your boss is going to look very strangely at you when you're going to shout, I want to have more sex. That's going to be a very weird thing for you right away there. But for me, one of the things I wanted to change was obviously to reduce my carbon footprint. From all the traveling, from all the flights, I always feel pretty guilty. And one of the brands I looked towards was a brand that does food. It's a really, I'm sure you have something similar in Finland. It's a food delivery service that come with a box of farm fresh produce from neighborhood farms, etc. But more interestingly, when I interviewed the CEO, he didn't talk about we want to create a plant-based revolution or we want to be or push you to be more carbon friendly or whatever. He talked about earth connection. That this thing that we all had to go on a journey ourselves to discover. This idea that, when you stand there and you're washing a beetroot and you see your hands being colored red. Because the thing is, I think most of us, unfortunately, especially younger generation, have forgotten how to cook, right? There's something about it. And I come, and I'm sure it's the same in Finland. I know we have all these Michelin star restaurants in Denmark. Sorry. The reality when I was growing up was somehow very different, right? It was overboiled potatoes. It was sort of pork meat that was sort of like eating the sole of my shoe. So I wasn't really brought up in the most fantastic kitchen. But here I suddenly had a company that gave me recipes each and every time with these boxes and slowly brought me on this journey to create change. And obviously, nobody has to pay me when I'm successful in the kitchen and I actually succeed creating that amazing vegan pie. And that's what you're going to find on my Instagram account, of course, when I brag about that. The reality, obviously, of change is somewhat different. And that is definitely not something you're going to find on my Instagram account. But there's so many buzzwords in this space about transparency, authenticity, being genuine. So I'll ask you one question, and I want you to answer that in the little question thing that's going on behind the scenes or whatever, all this tech stuff. Anyways, think about all these brands talking about purpose. But think about what brand, leader, or organization who have in fact created real change in your life. Think about that. What brand, leader, organization have in fact created real change? Because the thing is, the market is rapidly changing. I didn't write a second book just to earn more money. I didn't. I wrote the second book because I found out how difficult it was to create change in my life. How difficult it was to live more sustainably. It's tough. And I really see the marketplace changing quite rapidly from being a world where it's all about purpose to moving towards a different sort of almost post-purpose reality. Because if you look at it, we've been talking about functional brand, emotional brands, and all that stuff. And then suddenly we started talking about societal brands. That was where my first book came out, Good Advertising. And it was just adding, greener, more friendly, blah, 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 all this stuff in front of whatever we did. But if we really think about today in the marketplace, what matters? When everybody's talking about values, that won't really cut it. Actions, I hear a lot of people say actions, story doing, all this stuff. Simon Tark's book, story doing. But honestly, how many of you are really doing those bold actions? And if you are doing what Patagonia is doing, you don't need marketing. It's gonna sell itself. But the third thing is really about helping people on their journey. This thing about empowerment that Richard talked about. So moving from talking about a Prius that's the most environmentally sustainable car to actually talking about how I can become a more conscious traveler. And it's a completely different way of thinking about leadership. So for the CEOs in this room who are standing on a stage and talking about how SDG friendly their company are, adhering to the Sustainable Development Goals and how you believe in this and that, and to the CMOs in the room who are building brands that often end up being quite navel-gazing. Oh, look at us, look at what we are doing. So talking about age, this is a way younger Thomas. No curls underneath that little hat there, but this was my favorite bike. This was in fact my first bike, staying with the hero theme called Yellow Lightning. Why I show these little pictures because I know all of you have learned to bicycle at one point, and what you will notice on that bicycle is obviously the support wheels. And I remember the first time those support wheels were taken off my back, and my dad pushed me in the back and said, "Go, son, I believe in you, I have your back." And that's exactly what leadership is about. Leadership is not about saying, "I'm a leader, I'm the best at this, look at us, look at the change I'm doing." Real leadership is about pushing you in the back and saying, "I got you." So I'll share a model with you today called the Arrow. And the Arrow is inspired by coaching and psychotherapy because both those disciplines are goal-oriented. It moves you from a phase of something you want to change to actually helping you achieve that change. So the Arrow asks 4 fundamental questions. What, how, who, and when. So what probably shouldn't give you too much of a headache. What is it that you do? So maybe you're the Nikes of this world and you're doing running shoes. That should be a simple question to answer. How are you unique in delivering your product and services? Nike would probably say something along the lines that, oh, this is tested on athletes, so it's the best athletic gear you can buy. But the third question is really what changes all of this. From a why to focusing on yourself, on the purpose, to actually focusing on people. To putting yourself in people's shoes and asking, who can you help people become? Because all of those New Year's resolutions that you just shouted out are all a possibility to create a difference in people's lives. To take all of these dreams, aspirations, and make them come real. So you can see the difference about talking about the stuff you want to do to focusing on all those New Year's resolutions. For me, that is about creating meaning. It's about having a meaningful role to play in people's lives. The last question is when. So when can you enable that change? And that might be a situation, a specific time of day. For Nike, that happens daily because getting up and doing that run is a constant battle with yourself. So the outcome of this arrow, I could have called it a purpose. I call it a transformative promise because it's a promise about a change you can enable in people's lives. And let me give you one example. And obviously it's easier to talk about health, right? But Discovery is a health insurance company. They are present in 7 markets. They were started in South Africa. Their promise, in fact, is to incentivize people to live healthier. Think about how great that sentence is. Incentivize, it pushes you. And it speaks both internally in the organization and it speaks externally in the organization. And the amazing thing about having such a laser-sharp focus is that they actually nudges us to go further. And they have a program called Vitality. And that program, in fact, supports and encourages us to live healthier. So let's say you go and buy fruits and vegetables, you get rewarded. Let's say you hit the gym, you get rewarded. And by doing that, they've been extremely successful in helping their customers live healthier lives. And they've done a survey with Apple, 200,000 people, and the people who took part in the program exercised 5 days more per month. That's quite an achievement, right? If I just succeeded that after my New Year's resolution in 2023, I would be extremely happy. And quite often, a second thing, and I'm sure the CEOs can recognize this balance between purpose and profit. Quite often, it ends up being a two-headed purpose monster. Because the one side is saying profit, 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 and the other one is saying, oh, let's be nice, let's do something good for people and planet. How the heck do you align that? Here, when they're successful in making each and every one of us healthier, they have a better business case because they have to pay out less in premiums. So what I want you to think about is that who question. Who can you help people become? How can you play a meaningful role in people's lives? And there's so many things you can do. And let me give you one example that is sort of the, wait a moment, it's a snack bar. Can a snack bar find a meaningful role to play? Yes, it can. Kind Snacks, I'm not sure, do you have Kind Snacks in Finland? Yeah, okay, cool. When I interviewed their CEO, he talked about something interesting. Because Kind Snacks, he's a Israeli immigrant to the US. So he came from an extremely divided country, I guess, to also very divided country. So what he said was, there's a need for kindness today. And Kind Snacks' claim to fame is because it makes that snack bar that's kinder to the planet, that's kinder to your health, then they promote kindness. And again, they own a human value, something that again can resonate across the organization. And one thing he shared with me that I found so interesting was, internally they ask this question each and every year, you know, do you feel kind after you start working at Kind Snacks? 86% of people said yes. So it does resonate. It does make sense. And again, if you think about your purpose statements right now. It's a little exercise for the CEOs and the CMOs in this room. I hear a lot of do good for people and planet stuff, and I get it. That's what we all can agree on. That's what happens in a democratic process on a boardroom. Can I agree on that thing that's sort of, you know. But let's say you wake up in the morning and over your bedside table, there's do good for people and planet. I mean, what the hell are you going to do different? Are you going to hold the door for me at the conference? What's sort of your North Star? It's tough. And so by thinking about these meaningful roles, these concrete meaningful roles, and it's tough. There's a real blue ocean. There's something really interesting you can find in this. And I think especially now, during these more challenging times where you have to eat all these courage pills, this might be a time to think even harder about this. Because, and let me give you another example. In the business of dating apps, you would think there cannot be another dating app. We agree? I mean, we've seen them all, right? You don't have to be quiet just because you're like, I'm not on a dating app. It's okay. We've seen all of them, right? But at some point, you're also like, and especially the women in this crowd are probably also like, there's things that I still hate about dating apps. This stuff. So obviously, Bumble came along, a female-friendly dating app. So it doesn't need to be more difficult than that, in fact. So there's so many things you can do. Richard talked about the aging population. What can you do there to play a meaningful role in their lives? So to understand this even more, what I wanted to do was compare these two sorts of leadership, what I call a transformative leadership that is focused on the change that you as a brand can enable in people's lives, and a leadership that is a more typical leadership that says, you know, we're in charge. So I compared 4 transformative commercials with 4 purposeful commercials. And the interesting thing was, so the ones with a little underline are the transformative one. And I can give you an example. One of them is Always, P&G's Always campaign like a girl. I'm 100% sure you all have seen that, right? Yes? Basically, just want to change the sentence like a girl to a statement of, I'm not running as fast as the boys, to a sentence of pride. Compared that to something Budweiser did for Super Bowl, for example, where they said, we at Budweiser, they ran a whole commercial at Super Bowl saying we at Budweiser only produce beer either by renewable energy or by offsetting the production process. It's sort of one of those bragging commercials. I mean, when I was raised as a child, obviously my mom and dad told me to clean up my room, yeah? I'm sure you hopefully were told the same thing. So the thing is, I wouldn't get a lot of credit from my parents when I made all that mess. I cleaned up my room if I put up a big poster saying, "Look, Mom and Dad, I cleaned up my room." And that's what basically the purposeful approach is doing most of the time. But when we look at this little graph here on brand warmth, the fuzzy feeling you get when you watch the ad, they're doing pretty okay, all of them. If we look at competence, the interesting thing here is that even though in the transformative commercial, most of the time the brand doesn't talk about itself, but what it can do for you. And I don't know how you feel about real estate agents. I hate them, sorry. There are two types of real estate agents, okay? There's the one real estate agent who put up these signs like, "We sold 1 million houses on your road. We're the most successful real estate agent ever in Helsinki." You've seen that real estate agent, right? They're probably on your road as well, doing their advertising campaigns. Then there's another type of real estate agent that comes in, sits in the chair and says, "You considering moving? What's sort of important for you? Where you're moving to? What type of house you're looking for?" All those questions. So competence, I think, is as much about actually, again, putting your feet in people's shoes. The last one is an interesting one, motivation. People feel much more motivated by transformative approach. 29.6% more motivated. Because you believe in them. Like that bicycle, you push people in the back. And even more interesting, people are 29.4% more willing to pay a premium price when we talk about growth. So when you play a meaningful role in people's lives, people want to pay a premium. The example I shared with you with Årstiderne, there are plenty of competition out there right now, but Årstiderne have helped me live a more plant-based life. They've even taught me how to do vegan cooking. That's a pretty tough call for me. I love cheese, but they showed me other sort of things that I can embrace. So I wanted to understand this even more, and just fresh from press, we just did a big piece of research with GfK, and this is unfortunately looking at US consumers, but I think there are a lot of similarities anyways. What we did again was we took 20 transformative and 20 purposeful commercials and compared them. In this instance, a commercial from Chipotle that talked about, can a burrito change the world? That talked about sustainable agriculture and all the great stuff they're doing. And another one from Dove. I'm sure we all know Dove, from how they go about it and fight biases on a daily basis. The interesting thing about comparing these things is we see the point difference there between about making me feel good about buying the product, all the way down to 10% point difference in inspires me to be part of the change. Wow. For older generations, because this is across generations, for older generation, it looks a little bit different, because the older generations actually still sort of have a tendency to like the old purposeful approach. They want to know what FedEx is doing for the environment. They want to know what Neste is doing for the environment. But for the young people especially, that is not cutting through. They want to be part of the action. I'm sure for all of you who are kids, you know sort of that Greta Thunberg type thing, right? So growth, branding, all that stuff. We just came out of the pandemic. That was tough. Hopefully we came out of the pandemic, fingers crossed. But I think we all sort of realized one thing during the pandemic, was that the best things in life aren't things. I mean, suddenly we started exploring all these crazy things, all these sourdough videos. I'm like, what's up with baking sourdough bread? Or knitting. I mean, I have so many friends that put up knitting videos. I'm like, I'm still not into knitting. My thing was I wanted to play the synthesizer because I never really felt that I had the time to do that. It didn't go very well either. But if you think about it, all these things that brands can help us achieve. And yet all you do is talking about products. Because the fundamental thing about all of these things is that we as human beings are always on a journey towards becoming better. So what if brands could in fact be the ones that are there for human betterment rather than just plugging products? This is all about sort of self-actualization and what we're striving towards. And I think we see this very much so in the labor market, right? It's so difficult to keep people inspired these days because money is not going to make the thing work for them. They want other things. They want to learn. They want to grow. And yes, self-actualization, sort of that weird thing you hit at the 40s when you think you've got to buy a Harley. or probably the reality, how it looks like today, probably the more sort of proper 40-year crisis. Yeah. If his girlfriend breaks up, I guess it's okay. But it's crazy about retail. If you think about retail right now, and especially now when we go into more challenging times, I get why people don't go into retail stores. Why should we? I'm being frank today. You can hear that, right? Horrendous customer service most of the time. I can't really compare prices, so it's not a really exciting shopping experience. What are you delivering? So what is the experience, or maybe the transformation? How can you change your shopping into something about transformation? The Nike Soho, the Nike store in Soho in New York, it's all about transformation. You go in there, you can connect with artists, you can connect with athletes. The product is secondary. And let me give you an example, IKEA. And we all know what IKEA is famous for, right? Breaking up couples. We've all been there, right? We've been in that labyrinth, and for some reason we always get into an argument, right? It always happens. So besides obviously that and the labyrinth mall, that they're now going against that and they're thinking, how can we insert ourselves into cities? And not just being these mega malls showcasing products, but actually helping design people's homes. I don't know if any of you have been in one of their smaller stores, but what a nice shopping experience. Because there's always these things where you don't know when you have tons of questions, and suddenly they sit there between their computers and they can help you. Well, let me give you another example from Canada, a chain called Respect Your Universe. So it's a sports retailer. I don't know how you feel about going into a sports retailer, but paddle sport, is that a big thing now in paddle? Is that a big thing now? Yeah, good, okay. So I wanted also to sort of jump on that bandwagon thing, right? And you go into a regular sports retailer, and you're always being met with this extremely fit guy, intimidatingly fit, that knows everything, right? And it's not a very nice experience because... So Respect Your Universe found a who role, a meaningful role to play in people's lives, which was in fact help people no matter what their goals are in life or in sport. And it's so incredible to see how they do that. So when you go into their store, it's the average Canadian, average American, who's not the most fit, to be honest. And as we saw in the trend charts, that seems to be the case anywhere. And their CEO shared some of the letters that they got on a regular basis from their customers. Amazing stories about a woman just thanking them because she bought a pair of running shoes and just walked around the lakes. For her, massive achievement, but probably not an achievement that get that super fit guy very excited. And secondly, their stores are also a space that invite the community inside. So let's say you are super interesting, or I'll point at the one who's sitting behind the camera there, online, you behind in the office chair, you're super interested in kickboxing. And if you get enough people in your community to be excited about kickboxing, you borrow their retail space. So it's a retail space turned a gym. And in these troubling, challenging times, I think there's even more things we can think about as brands, because this is not easy. We're scared about our economic situation. Should we buy that car? Should we buy that washing machine? What are we going to do? All the way back, the last time we had a crisis, which was more or less about the time when I wrote my first book, I had an example in that book from Hyundai. And Hyundai did something very interesting at a time of economic uncertainty. They created an insurance. So if you were to lose your job, they got your back. So they would still make sure that you could pay off your car. And something that from back then is a long-running program that has been even more successful now during COVID. So think about those innovations you can do. But those innovations start by being human-centric, by understanding those concerns, those New Year's resolutions. One thing is obviously being afraid of losing your job or whatever. The women in this crowd might be more afraid of breaking nails and getting the nails to looking great. So let's get to another example here. But from Small Business Saturday, another initiative that actually started during the last financial crisis. What they did was they said, obviously we have a credit card solution that's expensive for the small corner stores. Secondly, I think we all love our little small corner stores, but unfortunately, we forget to go there and buy stuff. So they created this whole campaign, I'm sure quite a few of you know it, that said, go and shop in your local store. But the interesting thing is here, what happens when you find something that people want to take part in. Like Kind with the kindness, like Discovery with health. They found something that really made people become the agents of change. Because they gave them all the materials that they needed to promote for their small business. And the growth of this campaign is impressive, because it doesn't rely on traditional marketing resources, it relies on all of us. Kind of like how I wanted to share that vegan pie image, right? So look at the growth rate, a triple from 2012 to 2018. The same when they implemented this campaign in the UK, the figures are exactly the same. So we need to get over this focus on profit, because it's not going to lead anywhere. If you think about our cities, most of our cities, especially our city centers, are made for one thing, profit. All the things you have to go into, like go into a movie center like this, cost money. Because unfortunately, our cities have looked at us as consumers as well, rather than citizens. But even in our public spaces, we are seeing a revival of a new sort of thinking, where they actually also think about us as citizens who strive for healthier lives. This is an example, for those who have been to Copenhagen, of gyms. And this is not just a trend that's happening in Copenhagen, it's happening all over the world. I was in Chile not too long ago, the same thing, urban gyms. So I believe our way out of this is not to focus on the profit. It's not to take the navel-gazing look at your own purpose and the values, but actually think about how you can help people. And for me, that is in essence the greatest leadership. Think about that question I asked you in the beginning. Who have actually helped you create change in your life? For me, it's been the college teacher maybe, the biology teacher who made me see a world that I didn't even know existed. The educators, those people who got your back. And it's really understanding those 39%. Who can help us bridge that gap of the 39%? And this is not just to save your brands, as I said in the beginning. This is actually also to save all of us. Because unfortunately, we live in a world where there are people who want to take part and do something about climate change, and there are people who unfortunately still are sitting skeptical on their chairs and not doing much. But the challenge demands all of us, because if we look at the statistics, and I know that Richard already scared the shit out of us, so I'm gotta put a little more gasoline on that fire. Not Russian gasoline, not good. But it shows the urgency, right? It really does show the urgency. We need to act. So the thing is, how do we create change? That's what provoked me to write the book. Take quitting smoking, tough challenge. Your loved ones can tell you, your children can tell you, your doctor can tell you. They can even put these cancer-ridden ads on the commercials, but by the end of the day, the only one who can create change is you. So I know I started with a sort of provocative image of Jesus, but it is really to say, if you want to change the world, it really begins just with you. So to recap, 3 key takeaways. Please don't put on that hero cape. Turn people into the heroes of this narrative. Secondly, change the way you build brands and build leadership. It's not about your company. It's not about you as a CEO. Honestly, I don't care. I actually have a choice. Who can you help people become? How can you play a meaningful difference in my life? Thirdly, we have an incredibly opportunity right now that makes me excited. We just came out of COVID, the biggest experiment in not shopping. Now we're going through economic difficulty times. We can actually focus on human betterment. We can get our brands on the right path. And that obviously demands your bravery and your confidence. So I wish you the best of luck on your journey forward in creating change. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. I learned a lot. I also learned that it's so much easier to promise than keep the promise. You shared many great examples with us today, but what's your favorite company? Somebody who actually does what they promise.
The good thing about this methodology is, in fact, that the promise is on yourself as well. That is the thing, right? Because when Discovery says incentivize people to live healthier, if I fail, it's not the company's fault, it's my fault. So I think, in fact, the companies who get this mindset right are the ones that inspire me. And I do really see a shift, especially with a lot of the brands who've been in the purpose space for a long time. I think they're realizing now that they need to take a new approach to cut through the purpose. So let me give you an example that I absolutely loved from P&G recently called The Talk, because there's been a lot of talk about diversity and Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And basically that commercial is about an Afro-American family that needs to have the talk. And you think it's going to be about the bees and the flowers, but it's actually, in fact, a talk about how to be an Afro-American in the US and those racial ramifications. And that really made me think and challenge my own biases. So I think that's the type of work we need to see. I don't need to hear from another company, we're so diverse, but I want them to help me fight my own little things, yeah.
Perfect. And what about, because it's hard to get started, and then you are so afraid that you promise something that you can't keep. So is it better to just try to do something and say, yeah, I'm trying to be more sustainable, than then to skip it? So what is your recommendation?
I love honesty. I think for all of us who are trying to sort of change something in our lives, that's the honesty.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, I want to start running, I want to do this and that. I'm not 100% sure I'll succeed. Because I think a lot of the narratives in the beginning from companies were just too good to be true. I love that honesty when you come out and say, we're at this point right now, there's a lot of stuff we're not doing right. And we're sorry, but we live in a world that things are set up this way. So let's get more honesty in the room. I think that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, so you promise, but then you put the disclaimer.
I think it's just being not too perfect. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us are perfect. Brands are not perfect. So I think the problem is that perfection.
Yeah, that kills everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So you say, yeah, darling, I will cook every day, and then sometimes.
Exactly. I think it's that thing in relationships. I use this example sometimes when you want to fix a relationship. In the beginning, you say to your girlfriend, I love you, blah, blah, blah. At one point, the words are not really cutting through. So you want to see action. So you say, I promised to put that toilet seat down right, and half of the time you keep forgetting. But the thing I think that really matters in relationships with brands and people and in a real relationship is essentially how I make her feel.
Yeah.
So does she feel loved? Then we got a good relationship. And it's the same thing with brands.
And with customers,
Yes.
yeah. Hey, I promise that I'm not going to ask anything hard.
Nope.
So we are going to start something really simple. What's your purpose in life?
She did actually not promise me that. She promised to roast me, and thank you for doing that. Initially, with my first book, I thought my purpose was just to rarely change in essence. But I think my purpose has been much more clearer today. And so today my purpose is really to help and inspire other people's positive change. That's what inspires me, being on a stage like this, and hopefully seeing some impact, fingers crossed, from this talk today.
Thank you for that. Thanks for the great presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.